Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to Kvetching with Adam and Jared. It's us, the hosts, and we have a guest tonight, our second guest of 2024. We will turn the floor over to our guest, who will now introduce himself.
Hi, I am Peter Herman. I'm a professor of literature at San Diego State University. What more do you want?
Well, I mean, you are from Montreal, just like me. I mean, I think it's important.
That is true. I am from Montreal as well.
Yeah, and I am also an alumnus of San Diego State University. So it's good connection here. And
we have the bagels and the smoked meat. I mean, that trumps anything.
Bagels, smoked meat, best knishes, and cheese bagels.
But DZ Aikens in San Diego is top notch.
Not to anyone who has had smoked meat from Snowden Deli.
I was just there 3 weeks ago.
Or Schwartz's.
Schwartz's is the famous one, yeah.
Yeah, it's where all the tourists go.
I
mean, it's good.
Famous one, but Snowden Deli was the best one.
You got to come out to the Midwest for Zingerman's up in Ann Arbor.
It's all derivative of New York, and
no. The New York delis are overrated. But well, actually, maybe I shouldn't have said that on the podcast. I might get some hate mail now. I don't know.
From New Yorkers?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, all right. Well, let's get started talking about the subject. So, as an alumnus of San Diego State, I'm very disappointed to hear about what's been going on there. Apparently, after October 7th, the administration put out a letter, an email that went out to the entire campus community expressing that the university stands with the Jewish people, something to that effect. And they were then accused of Islamophobia for not... Okay.
Got to correct you a little bit here.
All right.
The administration, signed by the president, Adela de la Torre, sent out an email or a message to the whole campus condemning the Hamas attack and expressing sympathy for both Israelis and Palestinians in Gaza. And that's very important. It expressed sympathy for both sides.
When was the statement issued? How soon after the 7th?
Very quickly. I mean, I forget the exact date, but it would have been October 10th, October 11th.
So the sympathy expressed for Gaza would have had to relate to the ongoing conflict because Israel hadn't invaded Gaza yet.
Right.
No, then I shouldn't say. I mean, I don't remember precisely when it was, but it definitely expressed sympathy for both sides. And that is what the other side, the Students for Justice in Palestine or whoever it was, that's what they didn't like. In their view, expressing any sympathy for Israeli or Jewish victims, they code as Islamophobia. That's why they registered that complaint with the Department of Education.
Were they doubting the facts that there were these attacks on civilians and these brutal massacres, these rapes going on? Were they disagreeing with the facts, or were they just being indifferent to the facts?
I think they were more indifferent to the facts. I mean, I don't remember exactly what the complaint said. In fact, I don't think we've actually seen the complaint. All we've seen are reports on the complaint. But I think that they simply ignored that. They ignored the rapes. They ignored, the barbarity of what Hamas did.
I don't understand, even if we were to allow for a second that Israel, just, play a, hypothetical game here. Israel was the aggressor in every respect, it's a brutal occupier, et cetera, et cetera. And Israel says nasty things about the Palestinians. How is this Islamophobia? What does this have to do with the billion Muslims in the world? I do not
It
understand.
doesn't. It doesn't. The accusation of Islamophobia is essentially anti-Semitism in another guise.
Yeah, because this, I mean, again, if anyone's going to complain Islam in the context, condemn Islam in the context of this conflict, it would be specifically targeting Hamas and Islamic Jihad. And, you know, Hamas is the one who put Islam on the table here. They could have come up with a secular charter calling Israel to wipe Israel off the map without drawing from the Quran themselves. So if Islam has been brought into the conversation, it's not Israel who is responsible for that.
Right. Well, we all know it's ridiculous. What did the administration say then in reaction to this?
Oh, they haven't. I mean, nor would they. I mean,
All right, so why is this a story then? That just the SJP and maybe other student groups were complaining that this message was Islamophobic. What else is there to the story?
well, the other part to the story is what happened with the university senate. Now, you want to separate here the administration itself, the Delegatore, and you know, who are basically, you know, they don't want to offend anybody. Even though initially I think Adela Delegatore was about as woke gets, I think she learned very quickly that being woke is not something that's going to make donors very happy. So you can recall that a little while ago, a couple of years ago, we had this dean, whose name I will not mention, who tweeted that basically all Republicans stink in so many words. And huge controversy over that. And eventually it got to the point where she was removed from her position, sort of moved into some, you know, am I allowed to swear?
We do all the time.
Okay,
Well,
some
Jared
bullshit,
does anyway.
bullshit position where she's, you know, chairing some committee on sexual violence. In fact, she's doing, from what I can tell, absolutely nothing, and collecting $200,000 for doing that.
And she, of course, didn't lose her tenured position in whatever department.
Well, you know, the assumption was that she's being pushed out and she'll get another job. We just make sure she's not dean. But my point is that Adela Delegatore was pretty clearly responding to the conservative Republican donors who were saying, what the fuck? Well, what is going on here?
We're taking the swearing up a notch. All right.
Exactly. Fuck that. Yeah. So you've got the administration with Delegatore, who wants to make nice with everybody. You know, the administration, the one thing that they hate, no matter what, is noise. Then you have the very woke people on campus, the very woke faculty on campus, and in particular, the group that's in the DEI part of the university and who are also part of the Senate. Now, what happened there is me and a couple of other like-minded people wanted the Senate to reaffirm its resolution against anti-Semitism in the wake of 10/7, and in particular in the wake of a video that was circulating of two students ripping down posters of captured, kidnapped Israeli children.
And you wrote an op-ed on that in the Times.
Oh, right. I wrote it op-ed, you know, because what happened, and this really was an outrage, what happened was the Senate essentially hollowed out the resolution. It said, you know, we're going to condemn anti-Semitism in the abstract, but they removed all the references to 10/7, all the references to the poster ripping, all the references to the rise in anti-Semitism. Why did they do that? Well, some, you know, they claimed it was, we needed to see this in context. And if
Context
the-
is suddenly relevant for people on the left who previously denied that context was relevant. You just have to, look at the given situation of the Palestinians until, violence is committed against
Right.
Israel.
Well, but even that we need to see in context. And this actually follows a pattern. Earlier, it was actually about 2-3 years ago when there was yet another Hamas war, Hamas war started by Hamas, and there was a blatant anti-Semitic incident. Somebody went and tore down a big menorah outside the Chabad house. And sure enough, there was a controversy over this, and the chief DEI person said, well, we need to see this event in context. Of course, I condemn anti-Semitism, but we need to see it in context. I wrote an op-ed about that one too.
I fail to see what the context is of attacking Chabad.
What's the context of ripping a menorah down
from Chabad? Right.
Well, I think they were so, the people who did this were so outraged and so up in arms over Israel's behavior that they simply couldn't help themselves.
My response is, who gives a shit? That's their problem.
Well, that was my response.
It's their fucking problem. You don't go attack a Chabad house.
Now, this was after October 7th that the Chabad, it would have been Hanukkah.
This was actually about 2 years ago.
Oh, it was okay. All right.
But my point is that there's a pattern at San Diego State of condemning anti-Semitism in the abstract, but whenever there's an actual event, a concrete event, then all of a sudden we have to see it in context. And as one other person said, oh, if the Senate passes this resolution, students will find it incendiary. I mean, they're afraid of offending the anti-Semites, probably because they are anti-Semites.
Well, that's also part of a larger pattern, as I'm sure you know, that everyone's, feelings are taken into account except for the Jews, right? It's
right.
You can't, you have whatever vocabulary you use in class, however you phrase something, you need to be sensitive to what the students might think. So if you're teaching anything relating to racism or the history of slavery or the Civil War, sensitivity of individual students, you have to look at the makeup of the class and how they might react before you can even say anything. But for some reason,
as Tabia Lee, who was last on our show, said, Jews are just considered white oppressors by DEI, so we don't count. Our feelings about these things don't matter. That's the explanation.
Or worse than white oppressors.
But even if our feelings don't matter, where is the Jewish community in San Diego then on this? I know SDSU has a Hillel.
It's split as it is everywhere else. There's Hillel. There's with the ADL is here, JCC, the usual.
And who's active on campus? Is it just Hillel, or are there other Jewish organizations on campus itself?
That's a good question. There are a couple of Jewish organizations. I mean, it sort of focuses on Hillel.
There used to be this thing called the Jewish Student Union. I don't know if that's...
I don't think there's a Jewish Student Union. What there is, however, is a presidential task force on anti-Semitism, of which yours truly is a founding member.
Okay.
And, what happened there were several anti-Semitic incidents. This is going back like 5 years now, or something like that, on campus. I suppose culminating, and this was how actually I got involved with this, where some genius in the Department of Education wanted to bring in somebody from Farrakhan's organization. And fortunately or unfortunately, there was a video of this person on YouTube, beautifully shot, where it was just pure anti-Semitism. It's like every single trope you can imagine was there. And so we got involved with that. We wrote a number of op-eds. The op-eds, there were complaints to De La Torre, and De La Torre was just dragging her heels. She didn't want to say anything. And basically, she kind of got embarrassed into finally saying something. And after a bit, she decided to form a task force on anti-Semitism, which, we made very clear to her that this was not to be a sop. We were going
This was 5 years ago? It was that long ago?
something like that.
Mhm.
It was a couple of years ago.
Has the task force accomplished anything? I mean, I've yet to see a task force that does accomplish something, but
No, it has. I mean, not as much as you would like in some ways, but it has. I mean, we sponsored just most recently, we sponsored a panel on 10/7. We're going to be doing another panel probably on February 15th. We did get the Senate to do the original anti-Semitism resolution. And this was not small.
Is the resolution based on IRA? Have they adopted IRA?
No, they haven't. They haven't. That was a very difficult thing because we realized that if we wanted to go with that one, and if we mentioned Israel, we weren't going to get anything done. So we very, diplomatically came up with a compromise, which sort of avoided a lot of that. Now, subsequent events, however, have shown that the compromise is now untenable. On this task force,
well, I'm sorry, what was the compromise exactly? I mean, what compromise?
Don't mention Israel. That was the compromise.
So
it's not much of a compromise.
It's basically the JDA.
Yeah. So, I mean, it focused exclusively on the events on campus, not referring to others. Now, since then, I mean, we have one member of the task force who is what Natan Sharansky calls an Jew. He's one of these Jews who fundamentally thinks that Zionism is wrong and that Israel does not have a right to exist.
And he's on the task force for anti-Semitism.
And he is on the task force for yes. It's not clear to us whether he's pro-anti-Semitism or against anti-Semitism.
Oh, I see. Okay.
How did he end up on the task force?
Well, I mean, truth be told, he volunteered for it, and truth be told, he's professor of political science. He's well published. I mean,
is he in Jewish studies? Is he a Jewish studies professor?
No.
So what authority does he have to be an expert on anti-Semitism?
What authority does a guy whose specialty is Shakespeare and Milton have on anti-Semitism?
Well, you're affiliated with Jewish studies. We checked you out before you signed this.
Yeah, I am. And I am teaching a class on American Jewish literature.
Yeah.
But, he just published a book on earlier versions of anti-Zionism. I forget the precise title of it. I mean, he's got the qualifications. Just his ideology is something that most of the task force finds obnoxious.
The political science department has a couple of faculty members who are on the canary list.
What's the canary list?
The canary missions list.
That is what again?
The Canary Mission. It's a database that's online that's existed for probably a good 10 years, where they catalog, quote, anti-Semites among faculty and students, principally at various universities. It's a professor watch list for all intents and purposes. And, I mean, everyone's entitled to an opinion about that. That what they say on their website is 100% honest. They research anyone they put up there and they take direct quotes. I think, occasionally they might cast their net a bit wide in terms of who they put up there. Though, and I was, I used to be against them just because I just abhor the idea of these professor watch lists. But after the war of 2021, I've had a complete 180 in these things because Jewish studies in particular, like your colleague here in political science, who's now publishing books relating to Jews and has inveigled his way onto a task force, they're doing a lot of damage. They're doing a great deal of harm. And people think that just because they have expertise in Jewish studies, they get to police what is anti-Semitic and what isn't anti-Semitic. And very often the university administrators who create these task forces are clueless. Our friend up at Carleton, who's come up numerous times on our podcast, played a leading role in convincing the administration to create this task force on anti-Semitism. And she is a militant anti-Zionist who routinely denies what is blatantly anti-Semitic is anti-Semitism. Like Jasper Puar's organ harvesting charge, which is a reconfiguration of the medieval blood libel, and anyone with a 8th grade education could pick that up. But she writes an op-ed saying this is not anti-Semitic. How can you put something like that on an anti-Semitic task force? It's not going to protect anybody.
Well, I know. I mean, and that is that's the great argument. Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic? And, I suppose in theory, yeah, and you can be anti-Zionism being anti-Semitic. In practice, as we see every day, no. One bleeds right into the other.
Yeah. There's the rhetorical way it bleeds, and then without the rhetoric, there's always the litmus test that Jews are subjected to. So in practice, it's going to come out as anti-Semitic, even at times where the discourse itself isn't obviously anti-Semitic, like when they call Zionism a global threat, which is mathematically impossible. I mean, you have to be an anti-Semite to make any sort of.
That's why you need the IHRA if you're going to have any kind of standard for what anti-Semitism means. Unfortunately, when you have someone like this person on that task
Which shall remain nameless.
who will remain nameless.
Can I ask you something? Is the book in question Jewish self-determination beyond Zionism?
I think it is.
Okay, all right.
So you know who we're talking about.
Well, I know I just Googled. It took me 30 seconds via Google to figure out.
I just didn't want to be the one to say it.
Oh, that's all right. You don't have to apologize. I've never heard of the person before, so. But I'm not in political science.
Don't tell him that.
Yeah, so you get someone, an un-Jew on the task force, and you pretty much have your hands tied. There's nothing you could do. But there's no standard for choosing people to be on these task forces. Like, how do you say no? We can't allow a certain faculty member to be on the task force.
I will tell you.
All right.
There was, and I really don't want to get into the details because it had to do with university politics.
Don't say anything that'll get you in trouble with your school.
No, it's just too. But suffice it to say that a group of people, including 2 of them on our committee, wanted to put someone else on this committee who, let's just say, had no business on this committee. Huge fight over that. The result of it was
that person Jewish?
Oh God, no.
Okay. All right.
No. And in fact, the supposed reason for placing this person on the committee was that we needed to have someone who was going to represent the Palestinian voice.
On an anti-Semitism committee?
Yeah, on an anti-Semitism.
And why can't they be on an Islamophobia committee?
Well,
is this a political?
Ultimately, he was.
Is this a political scientist?
No.
Okay, that's who I'm thinking then. All right.
So basically, we realized we needed rules, and so now for anyone who's going to be on the task force, we have to all vote on this. So there are now, there's now a filter.
Okay. So
Yeah.
how come you voted this person on, this un-Jew?
No, the un-Jew was placed on the committee before. He was one of the original members.
I'm going to read here a quote of his book. This is all public knowledge on the internet. An exciting, profound, and humane critical rethinking of Zionism as the ideological foundation of the Israeli state. Newton's alternative vision reinforces what Zionism might have become if its leaders had not opted for an exclusivist Jewish state necessitating the continuous repression, exploitation, and discrimination of the Palestinian people in their own homeland. The recent surge of the Israeli far right gives this book a timely urgency, especially for liberal Jews who should be deeply disturbed, and I consider myself a liberal Jew, by what has happened in Israel beneath the banner of Zionism, and I am not disturbed. So, I mean, this is like, this person should not be adjudicating anti-Semitism.
Well, suffice to say, I think he's outvoted on this committee now.
Well, that's good. That's important.
I am just very happy that I was not studying in that department at the when this person was a faculty member there. I don't think I would have.
Actually, you were.
I was.
Yeah, he's no. Yeah, I'm looking at the picture. He's no spring chicken. I mean, he's.
The faculty has undergone a lot of changes since I left.
Yeah, we're all older, older and grayer. But yes, that's absolutely true. Now, I mean, the hard part about this is that in responding to that stuff, you don't want to be in a position where you find yourself defending the radical right in Israel. I mean, people who say things like, I think all Palestinians have no rights and they should all die. And there are people who are saying that. And you don't want to be in a position, or I don't want to be in a position defending, what is happening on the West Bank, which frankly, from what I've been able to read, sounds pretty awful. So you're caught between, these two opposing poles.
The dilemma of the liberal Zionists. But hey, I have no problem saying I despise Bibi's government. I don't like the man.
Right.
I don't like, I will openly call Ben-Gvir and company racists. And I do not support the continued building of settlements. As of Oslo, all settlement construction should have stopped. I mean, that's my opinion on that. But this doesn't mean I'm undermining the Jewish state. I believe 1948 was the legitimate expression of Jewish national self-determination. And the post-1967 quote occupation of these territories was legitimate as well. I mean, a war was won and nobody knew what to do with this territory. So it obviously has to remain in the victor's hands until some sort of solution could be reached. And if your opponents say no Jewish state anywhere in Palestine, well, what else are you going to do at that point?
I completely agree. I mean, there was an attempt in 1947, I think it is.
Resolution 181.
Right, for the two-state solution. It made sense. Here are two states. You're on one end, we're in the other.
Yeah.
And Jerusalem, I think, was shared, but I'm not sure.
It was supposed to be shared.
It was supposed to be shared.
Yeah.
Well, one side said, sure, that's great. We're all for that. I don't think the other side accepted that.
Yeah.
And
well, the opponent, the other side claims that in 1947, the Palestinians didn't have a voice. It was the Arab states speaking for them, which was true to a certain extent. But the problem is the Palestinian leadership agreed with them, right? We see this with the emergence of the PLO in the subsequent 2 decades. Their position was no Jewish state anywhere in Palestine, even after, Egypt and Jordan started to come around and say, well, maybe we can work with Israel here. The PLO remained adamant until the late 1980s. So it's pretty clear where the Palestinian leadership would have voted in 19.
I'm not actually against the settlements, but we're in disagreement about that. I tend to think that if the Palestinians were serious about recognizing Israel and allowing Jews to be citizens or even just residents of a Palestinian state, then the settlement should not be a problem. But that's a whole other matter.
Yeah, that's another issue.
But I just looked it up, and that guy was not there when I was a student.
Okay, well, you were lucky. What can I say?
Yeah,
he most certainly is there now.
Well, to throw in a Seinfeld quote, since his name almost sounds like it, the bell tolls for thee. It's a Seinfeld reference. I hope some people get it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so you clearly have become an activist of sorts on your campus. I mean, did you foresee this in any way? Has this been a slow awakening for you? Did you get dragged into it really against your, I wouldn't say against your will, but just, I mean, that's the way I got sucked into all this. I really did not start out expecting
I didn't start out. I mean, part of it is I firmly believe that if the humanities are to survive, which frankly doesn't look like they're going to, but never mind. If the humanities are to survive, then we need to start speaking to people outside our charmed circle. So I started slowly, but eventually do more of this, writing editorials, op-eds, opinion pieces, and trying to place them in various outlets. I've had some success with it, not as much as I would have liked. So I was kind of always looking for something to write about. Then the incident with with Farrakhan's aide came up, and that was huge. I mean, that really did convulse the campus. And so I started to pay much more attention to this and be much more involved with arguments about, and policies about anti-Semitism. And as a result of that, I've sort of slowly but surely moved more and more into this area. I didn't seek it out. To this day, I can't quite understand how it is that, I've never really been involved with Jewish affairs. When my wife and I first got married, somebody asked her if I was Jewish, if we were a mixed marriage, because she would go to synagogue and I would never go. And somehow or another, as time went on, Judaism has kind of become central.
Well, you are from Montreal. You grew up in Côte Saint Luc, a block and a half from I did. So it's the Jewishness is ingrained. It's coursing through your veins, even if you don't realize it.
Apparently so. It's imprinted in the DNA.
Yeah, no, I've realized moving to a place where there's virtually no Jews. The only way you could be Jewish here is by affiliating with a synagogue. It's not
right.
It's not like in Montreal where I could just walk out of my house and be in a Jewish universe with people who are not particularly practicing in most respects. Their parents probably forced them to do stuff, but it's still a Jewish environment. Our culture was Jewish. So, but I mean, San Diego obviously is a heterogeneous university and it's a heterogeneous school. What's the state? So there is a Jewish studies program at your university, right?
Very small one, yeah.
Okay.
I remember Zev Bar-Lev, when I was there, I took, he was running Jewish studies, or at least was part of the committee and taught a lot of the classes. He taught Hebrew. I took Hebrew from him in the Jewish heritage class. He died about a year or two ago, but he would have been definitely someone in your corner.
Well, Risa Levitt was the major force behind Jewish studies the last 15 or so years. But she just left SDSU to go to Jerusalem.
Oh, she's on your website. I'm looking at it
here. Risa Levitt. And she's now the chair, the chief person for the Biblical Lands Museum there.
It's a small program.
It's a very small program. So we're kind of, so who's going to take this over? I actually asked the dean if I could do it. And she said they just made a decision to give it to somebody in the religious studies department, a guy named Drew Thomases. And supposedly they're going to hire someone to run the program, but we'll see if that actually happens.
That would be a new tenure track line in a specific department?
Yes. Although then you're going to have the problem of...
Wasn't there the Lipinski Center?
There is, and that's a very good question, because I have not heard anything about the Lipinski Institute in years now, to the point where oh yeah, what happened to the Lipinski?
Yeah, what happened to that?
Yeah. No, I think the Lipinski Institute or whatever it's called, has been sort of taken, has been eclipsed by the Leach-Tag Institute, because there's something part of Leach-Tag called the Murray Gallatin Israel San Diego, I think it is, exchange program, where they send over Israeli professors. And so we regularly have two of them teaching in the department. So they teach film, they do literature. It's a great program.
What, is a visiting scholar program or something like that? Yeah. That's great.
However, ever since the political science department got a chair who is not a friend of Israel.
That's the guy on the canary list.
Right. Well, he, or, there's never been a political science person in that department. They taught in history, they teach in literature, they're in variety urban studies, they're at other institutes in San Diego, USD, University of San Diego, UCSD, University of California, San Diego, but not the political science department.
So this guy, this anti-Zionist who's running the program, his work is related to Jewish stuff, or it's not? He's completely
No, there's, well, what anti-Zionist? There's
the one who Adam keeps referring to.
no. He's not running anything.
The
He's not
chair?
running.
Yeah, the chair.
No, the
I
chair
think
is just the chair of the political science.
I think the chair is the SJP faculty advisor. Or
May
what?
very well be.
Yeah.
Political science tends to be, more conservative of a discipline.
Really? I don't
Well,
think
compared to
so.
anthropology or gender studies.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
After economics,
it's a very low bar, you're saying.
I'll tell you, Bart, but I'm a historian, and on the whole history, I mean, yeah, there's some schools where, there's abhorrent history faculty who are incredibly, politically active and ahistorical when it comes to, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But
after economics, political science probably has more conservatives than any other field within the humanities or social sciences, but that's not saying much.
And I don't mean conservative, I just mean not woke. Okay, you know what I'm saying. We're conservative in an academic sense, right? But not conservative in a political sense necessarily. So, but again, getting back to this Islamophobia and the anti-Semitism and the task force, how, the problem is we've been talking to people from various campuses, sometimes faculty, sometimes journalists covering the area. How much of what we read in the newspaper is hype? How much does it really affect the daily life and heartbeats of the campus, at least for people who are in the universe of the orbit of the stuff?
Truth be told, probably SDSU is a much calmer campus, certainly than UCSD. So we don't have on SDSU's campus the kind of virulence that you have at UCSD or even USD, from what I've heard. And I think that's partly because most of our students are working, they're not going to school full time. And I suppose you could say they just don't have the time for this shit. They don't have the luxury.
But I do, when I remember protests on campus and rallies and demonstrations.
Very little.
I remember it though.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm not saying it doesn't.
Perhaps it's changed.
Yeah, I think that's
but there at the Aztec Center, there used to be all kinds of marches and rallies.
It happens occasionally. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Certainly, if student evaluations are anything to go by, students are or my student evaluations are to go by, students are very conscious of being woke, and they will occasionally say something that, if a professor says something that they don't like. But overall, it doesn't really affect much. On the other hand, if it was going to, it's not going to be me. I mean, I'm a full professor, a couple of years from retirement. I'm largely insulated from these things. On the other hand, then you get something that happens like the Senate saying that ripping a poster down of kidnapped Israeli children, well, we need to see this in context, and we can't condemn it because that might hurt somebody's feelings. And then you get a sense of just how great the hatred of Israel is. And I also have to ask, if this event is not considered anti-Semitic, what is anti-Semitic? So, SDSU is not going to, it's not going to make a journalist happy. Not that much is we're not Columbia, we're not Harvard, we're not Cornell. But
But
It's
it's been in the
there.
media. It's been in the media a bit.
Well, as I kept saying, because of the previous dean, fire seemed to have had us on speed dial.
Mhm.
Um, it's in the, but again, we're not in the same boat as those other schools are.
Mhm.
Has UCSD had a major problem? I haven't read much
Oh
about
yeah,
it.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
You mentioned USD. I haven't heard anything about that.
USD had a panel a little while ago, which was all pure anti-Israel.
Really?
Yeah, it was just a hate.
USD is just it's a Catholic liberal arts college. It's very small.
It is, but as we know, or as you guys should know, our views of the conflict are generally not shared by people who are younger. Most Israel is a pariah to people who are college age and slightly above. My daughter's, I suppose, a perfect example of that. She's 30 years old, but all she knows of Israel really is Netanyahu. And the Netanyahu government has just alienated, an entire generation of Jewish kids.
You know, if they
don't
were
know
to
if
get on
I
a
would
plane and
say-
go over there, if they, I mean, I can't think of any other country in the world where people are so obsessed with what they think are the politics, to the point where they will just publicly denounce and try to find ways to liquidate it. I mean,
I really don't believe that the blame for this could be pinned at Netanyahu's feet or his government.
Well, it can in a lot of different ways.
it
One,
predates him.
there's all this evidence. I mean, that he basically helped support. And second of all, hey, this 10/7 happened on his watch. Therefore, he is responsible
Yeah, but
for it.
this has been going on longer, much longer than 10/7. And I remember this vitriol building as far back as Omer's government.
Yeah, no, the vitriol certainly, but but for Hamas to have planned such a massive invasion, and what happened to Israel's much vaunted intelligence
Yeah, so
service?
there was a massive intelligence flavor, but that doesn't mean young Jewish kids should say, well, the state therefore doesn't have the right to exist.
No, that's. I mean, he's done lots of other things that help with that.
Yeah, but at the same time, nobody's calling for the liquidation of the United States because of Trump. I mean, well,
Actually,
really
some are.
well, okay, but that's really before
Seriously, I have seen videos, of course, on Twitter, now known as X, of people saying that, we need to decolonize the United States and give the land back to the original.
Yeah, but that's been said for a long time. I mean, you got all kinds of wackos that say that.
Right. And nobody's also saying, so if Israel is a settler colonial state, well, so is Canada. So is so is Australia. So is New Zealand. And is it, as you just said, is anybody calling for their dissolution? Give the land back to the Maori.
there was always somebody who was there before you, and you could always the people who came after
and
you.
who did they get the land from?
And I'm fairly certain that whatever Native
At least in
Americans,
the case of Israel, the original owners were today's owners.
unless some Canaanites turn up.
Right.
Yeah.
And then who did they get the land from?
No, it's absurd. Even the context of the Americas, the whole settler. I mean, yeah, obviously the land was colonized, but the claim that these people are foreigners and we were here first. There was always someone who was there before you, and my limited knowledge of Native American history and lore suggests that they came over in waves over thousands of years. And I'm fairly certain that the Aztecs displaced some people who were there before there and built a brutal empire on top of them.
And also the issue.
That's something that I kept reminding people at SDSU, the one that wanted to use the Aztecs as this great symbol. It was like, yeah, we're going to go back to human sacrifice.
Well, they did get rid of Montezuma.
That they did.
Yeah.
That did.
Right. But but at least the Yishuv bought a lot of that land from the Ottoman Empire before they
Right.
went.
Now that's, which by the way, was an empire.
Right?
Yeah,
We tend
but
to
you
forget
can't
that.
call it, you can't say that. It's Islamophobic to call the Ottoman Empire an empire.
Is it?
I'm joking. Well, I don't know. I think if you take
Uh-huh.
it to its logical conclusion, you're going to arrive at that position. And people say, "Oh, but it was a very benevolent empire. It wasn't pro
Oh,
extraction." And
Yeah, it was.
tell that to 1.5 million Armenians. They'll have a
It
good.
was an empire based on putting your feet up.
That's a Seinfeld reference.
Old reference, yeah.
So, I mean, the whole settler colonial paradigm, I don't think it really works. If you want to use it for the construction of settlements to make an argument, it's something that could be debated, but not 1948. It just doesn't work. It's absurd. It's not a European state. It was an act of national self-determination, just as what the Palestinians are doing is ethno-national self-determination. It's two ethnic groups claiming the same land, claiming
and
each of them claiming we were here first.
and Israel today, from what I have read, is a seriously multi-ethnic society.
Yeah, I mean, again, we have to be careful with the word ethnic because Jews fit the definition of an ethnic group, an imagined community of kinship and common descent, based on genealogy. So we just happen to look different because we're dispersed all over the world. So I don't like the word ethnic,
Okay,
in the Jewish sense.
it's a highly heterogeneous society.
Yes, with
How
60%
about that?
from the Middle East, 60% actually literally indigenous to the region in which they are. So calling them settler colonialists is a little bit problematic. Yeah, definitely.
That it is.
So how do you see, I mean, how do you see things? I mean, okay, so there's this investigation going on, right? Is there actually a federal investigation for the Islamophobic charge?
I have no idea. I mean, all we know is this happened, and then communication shuts down. The university is not saying anything, and the feds are not saying anything. I mean,
basically
it's obviously bullshit, and I think it's just handled as an annoyance.
It's basically just bad press. There's nothing more to it than that, right?
And not even much bad press, because there's nothing there. And if they're going to, as they did, quote the letter, it's hardly evidence of anything nefarious. So what it comes down to, and I wrote about this in another op-ed, about how you can never condemn anti-Semitism by itself. It always has to be wrapped up with something else.
Yeah.
You can't. We condemn anti-Semitism in all other forms of violence.
Jared calls this all lives mattering.
Yeah, it's all lives mattering to Jews. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but what this also shows is, again, you can't even now condemn anti-Semitism. I mean, that De La Torre tried to be sympathetic to both sides. That's not allowed anymore. Any sympathy for Israel, any sympathy for the Jews, that is forbidden.
Yeah.
According to some, at least.
Yeah, no, I mean, and for them, the only time they will, really condemn anti-Semitism, and even then, it's still all lives mattering, is when it's white supremacists who are doing it, right? The people, an act can only be anti-Semitic if it comes from the right, and if the ethnicity and race of the people, ethnicity, race, and religion of the people committing it are, higher up on the oppression food chain than the people being oppressed.
So, after the Tree of Life shooting in Pittsburgh, that you can condemn anti-Semitism alone, right? That's fine.
Right.
But after 10/7, no, you got to put it into some kind of larger context.
Always. And this was happening before 10/7.
Even with Tree of Life, no, they had to say, but these are white supremacists. We're all in this together. You have to condemn this racism and that racism and this racism, and they hate you as much as us. And it's like, okay, well, let's leave Israel out of the equation here. Then we will work with these other groups and we will fight white supremacy. But if you're going to bring Israel into the equation and vilify our identity, how exactly are we supposed to work with you? Why would we work with you? I mean, it doesn't make any sense. When BLM Chicago issued their, that's, I'm sure you saw it, their image We Stand with Palestine, and it had a paraglider.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did not go over well.
I mean, that's actually, we support mass killing. That's what they're saying.
Yeah. We support, and then you get people demonstrating pro-Houthi and weirdly calling it Yemen.
I know nothing about the conflict in Yemen except for the fact that, there's a Shiite side and Iran is using it as a proxy war. And
Yeah.
I think that's far more knowledge than any of these protesters at the moment who are condemning the American strikes on it. Their framework is just the United States bombing Muslims once again. That's their entire logic.
Well, their framework is whatever the United States does is wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, because as a previous guest, or maybe it was you, Adam, pointed out, is that it's a war in Western civilization in many respects, right? And then even, the woke white people in the United States, are articulating it that way, right?
Yep.
Western civilization is evil and needs to be dismantled in every.
That was Corinne Blackmer. So
Yeah.
those of you interested in hearing that podcast who have not, you can look up that episode.
And it's highly worth watching because she does so from the LGBT community perspective. Who, the more LGBT people I talk to, they've resented being conscripted into this, wokedom that they don't necessarily really, care about. It's like, we're gay, we're for gay rights and all that, but don't bring us into this larger, framework of fighting a war against the West. We want to be part of civilization. We want our rights. And we want to be left alone to go about our lives after that.
Yeah, queers for Palestine. Go be gay in Gaza.
Yeah.
See how it works out for you.
Yeah, but the very act of you saying that by some people that I know, I won't name any at the moment, they would call you an Islamophobe simply for saying that. Yeah.
Oh well.
Yeah. You can't condemn the practices of an Islamic, culturally Islamic state, not that they would claim Gaza as a state, because it's cultural relativism and it's not your place. It's an excuse to go in there and colonize them.
And yet they condemn me. They don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. Interesting how it works.
Yeah.
Works. So what's your, as we near the hour mark here, what's your, my last, maybe Adam has some more thoughts here that he'd like to express, but I'm just wondering what you think, like, the future situation on your campus will be. And again, with this whole, you're right about the investigation. I think there must have been at least 6 investigations opened about anti-Semitism on campuses during the Trump era. And I've never heard about a single one of them since. They made a new splash and then that was the end of it.
Well, part of it is once these things become Title IX investigations, then they are private. Only the people involved with them know the outcome of that.
How many years? So they might have reached an outcome and we don't know about it?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
Exactly.
But they're not all Title IX investigations. So the one in Vermont, that was a DOE investigation.
Yeah, you just don't hear what happens. I kind of wonder, is that just because the media is uninterested, always chasing the new shiny thing, and very few people will sort of follow up on it. The accusation of Islamophobia is going to go absolutely nowhere,
right?
Because it's obviously ridiculous.
But it would make the news if a professor was fired for one of these charges, especially if it's a tenured professor. We would know about it.
Oh yeah. You would know about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't think anything's going to happen with that.
Mm-hmm. So all this litigation is just pretty much a waste of time for everyone.
Yeah. It's certainly wasting people's time. Because it's a false charge, but it still has to be investigated. So the university has to devote resources to defending it, and the Department of Education or whoever it is has to spend resources investigating it, even though everybody knows that it's bullshit. And worst of all, it's a distraction. And it's distracting from the very real acceptance of anti-Jewish violence among many on this campus, that they do not want to ever really condemn anti-Semitism.
And it's distracting from what universities are supposed to do. We're supposed to be here to, educate through critical inquiry, the weighing of different positions, grounded in fact. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing in colleges. And
Grounded in evidence, yes, I know. But unfortunately, as we all know, we are now in a post-truth society.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
I
I don't support. I don't usually support the Republican tactics of, hammering down on the universities, but I mean, from their perspective, it sort of makes perfect sense, given what we hear coming out of so many campuses.
Well, and then we hear what's coming out of some of the Republicans, and it's even scarier.
Well, again, I'm not denying that. I'm talking specifically about education policy here, right? I mean,
No, there's no doubt that the university has handed the right or the radical right all the evidence that it needs.
yeah, and it's solid. It's absolutely solid.
We now see with I call them the Three Stooges, Claudine Gay and the others. And I just read an article that apparently Claudine Gay is being offered multi-million-dollar contracts by publishers for her memoirs.
Who's she gonna plagiarize them from?
I
mean, I'll ghostwrite them.
That's exactly what I was wondering.
Yeah.
So who's she going to get to write this?
Yeah. I don't think I'm allowed to write as a Black woman, so it probably won't work out. But
no, but no one's going to know it's you anyway.
That's true. That is a good point.
Because I mean, the danger is that you will be accused, if it ever comes out, of ventriloquizing her and stealing her voice.
Not if she's making money off of me.
Oh, Carol Swain can write it because apparently she plagiarized from.
Yes.
Yeah, right.
And a variety of other people. Yeah. It really is just unbelievable. Get
Claudine,
caught plagiarizing and then get a multi-million-dollar contract.
Claudine Gay has made an entire mockery of the academic establishment in every respect. And I don't just mean her being present. I mean, the very fact that someone could get tenured with that CV that she had. I mean, it's and get a job at Harvard. It's obscene.
Yeah, I mean,
totally obscene.
Look, truth be told, I am a minor scholar at a second-tier school. My H index, according to Google, is 19. Her H index, before Google removed it, was 10.
Yeah, no, that's horrible. Yeah.
No, truly, that is a what the fuck moment.
Yeah. I mean, I know, again, without jumping on the whole, oh, it's because of DEI that she got there. I can name a half a dozen other white people off the top of my head who advanced the academic ladder and really had no right to, based on what they did. And since I wasn't inside the rooms when, tenure was voted for, I can't explain it necessarily. But yeah, I mean, it's just whatever the justification for originally tenuring her at Stanford and then hiring her at Harvard, something's very wrong. And, these are two of the most prestigious universities in the country. She's a political science. She didn't publish a single book. She edited a volume a few years ago when she was already at the top of the academic ladder. Yeah. No,
I have published, well, I've just published a book, but.
How many books do you have out?
About 4 monographs.
That's a hell of a lot. For someone in literature, I mean, that's quite a few.
Oh yeah, and a whole bunch of anthologies, wow. and other essays.
Yeah, you have journal articles too, presumably.
You mean like edited volumes?
Yeah. I call them.
And you have journal articles, presumably, right?
And I have journal articles. Yeah.
That's an impressive for, I mean, what I know about publishing and for people in literary studies, and how long it takes to produce a book in that discipline. That's actually a hell of a lot of books to publish.
Yeah.
Yes, well, it's supposed to be my job. So here's my latest. Very cool cover.
Yeah.
Really modern others. I love the cover.
He called it a second-tier school. I graduated from that second-tier school, but it doesn't sound so second-tier now, does it?
Well, he went to McGill, so compared to where he went.
Well, that's true. I did go to McGill.
As did I. Yeah.
A fine institution.
Adam, you did quite well yourself for having graduated from a second-tier school.
I tried. I've done my best.
What's your course load, if I may ask, at your school? What's your teaching?
3-3.
And you published all that with 3.3. That's great. That's absolutely terrific.
I have 4 and 4.
Right. You haven't published 4 books.
That must be the key to it. Yeah.
Well, you just, I just made it a priority, and I like to write.
Yeah, but you've more than, I mean, I'm sure the publishing expectations of your school and department were less than what you actually produced.
Yeah, you might say that.
Yeah.
You might say that.
I'm
but-
going with you. I mean, the California state system, they all teach 4.4. They've got no publishing expectations. I mean, they might need a book to get tenure, but after that, they're
Yeah, I mean, it gets more complicated because, there's always, and it's been more pronounced lately, a lot of what you might call mission creep. So, supposedly the University of California is where the PhD students are, et cetera, et cetera. Well, SDSU now just got permission to pursue its own independent PhD. Well, so that means we're horning in on the UC territory.
Mhm.
But just below us, you have the community colleges, and now there's some plot afoot that they're going to start awarding bachelor degrees. So they're kind of, so it's the divisions.
Yeah, I've heard that on
being-
community colleges.
the divisions.
Isn't San Diego State expanding to a new campus where the Qualcomm Stadium used to be?
Yes,
Is
that's a big. That is, I think, a highly controversial move.
Isn't that what the graduate school is that you're talking about?
No,
Okay.
no. That project was sold as this is part of our, our expansion. Supposedly, we're going to expand to have 50,000 students. Now, truth be told, SDSU's enrollment has been defying gravity. I mean, it's seriously going down at other CSUs and other colleges. For some reason or another, we just keep going up and up and up. And so they then came up with this to have a new stadium and, buildings and whatever. But if you look at the fact sheet that's available for the Mission Valley project, you will find out exactly how many apartments are going to be available. You will find out exactly how many parking spots are going to be available.
I don't mean to cut this
There's
conversation short,
nothing
but
there about classrooms.
Uh-huh.
I don't mean to cut this conversation short, but I'm not sure our viewers are interested in the
That's true.
State schools expansion, architecturally speaking. I've always wanted to pretend to be an architect.
Unless they're from San Diego, in which this would be fascinating.
We're better off talking about Montreal Smoke Meat. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. So Adam, do you have any closing remarks or questions for our?
No, I just want to thank Peter for appearing on Kvetching, coming on and Kvetching with us.
Much kvetching. Thank you guys for inviting me. This has been great.
Absolutely, absolutely, and we look forward to another half a dozen books being produced by you in the coming years.
I hope so. All right, guys, take
Thank
care.
you.
Thank you very much.
Good night,
Bye-bye.
everyone.